Welcome everybody to AFSO 21 Radio. You're listening to the Weekend Wrap-Up.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Weekend Wrap-Up here on AFSO 21 Radio. I'm your host, Kevin Ferrara, and folks, for this episode, we're doing something we talked about in previous episodes that we'd like to go ahead and do, and that's highlight fire service organizations. Well, this episode, we are highlighting the Pennsylvania State Fire Academy, and joining us today is going to be Tom Cook, the Pennsylvania State Fire Academy Administrator. However, before we get started, let's hear from our sponsor, Fire Department Coffee.
Firefighters work long shifts. That's the nature of the job. If your station is like most, coffee is what keeps you going. That's why you should check out Fire Department Coffee. Veteran owned and run by firefighters, Fire Department Coffee offers a wide variety of delicious coffee, including their signature line of spirit-infused coffee, all roasted by hand and delivered right to your door. Even better, 10% of net proceeds from every sale goes to benefit wounded, ill, or injured firefighters and other first responders. And they've got a special deal for the Weekend Wrap-Up listeners. Enter discount code AFSO21, that's AFSO21 at checkout to get 10% off your next order at Fire Department Coffee. FireDepartmentCoffee.com, that's FireDept Coffee.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Weekend Wrap-Up. As I said at the top of the podcast here, we want to go ahead and make sure that you check out Fire Department Coffee. They have a new spirit-infused coffee club. Their space is limited, so be sure to check out FireDepartmentCoffee.com and get in on that club because their coffee is delicious. So as you heard at the top of the intro, my guest today is none other than Tom Cook, Pennsylvania State Fire Academy Administrator. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on.
So Tom, one of the, those that listen, they know anytime I have a fire guest on the podcast, first question out of the box is, obviously give a little bit of an introduction, but we want to know, how you got involved in the fire service and, throughout your career, how you ended up where you're at right now in that seat as the administrator of this Pennsylvania State Fire Academy.
Yeah, last man standing, huh? Yeah. I actually come out of I think I'm third generation firefighter in the Cook family, going all the way back to the early 1900s in Springfield, Illinois, with the volunteer fire department out on the great Western frontier, which was my grandfather. My father was a volunteer firefighter. I started a long time ago as a volunteer. In fact, some of the earliest pictures I have from my parents are, me as a toddler standing on the running board of the ladder truck, kind of the, so it's really been in the blood for a long time, so to speak. While I was in college, I split time between a volunteer fire department in Monroeville, a suburb outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and West Lanham Hills down in Prince George's County. And I always tease everybody that my real firefighting training took place in the tenements and everything of the area around DC and in Prince George's County. After college, I went into corporate finance. Originally was my career after college, and I still carried on as a volunteer. Held every rank in the volunteer fire department except chief of department. I was the deputy chief and training officer when the circumstances changed for me. And I decided to get out of the corporate rat race and returned and accepted a full-time fire instructor position at the Allegheny County Fire Academy. The education and training of firefighters has always kind of been a passion, a love. You can use all the words you want to describe it, but it's really been my main focus. So I started there, spent about, I think, 7 years full-time fire instructor, and then decided I wanted to get back on the streets and made a move from there to a pretty progressive combination department, the Mount Lebanon Fire Department outside of Pittsburgh, as a career lieutenant. Originally went there to get a break from training, which lasted about my probationary period, and then I was put on the training platoon with my primary focus was the development of the new firefighters, both career and volunteer. So we kind of reorganized, regrew the recruit training program for the fire department. And my reputation had started to precede me, as they say. And Chief Jones from the city of Pittsburgh had the opportunity to bring another assistant chief on board to oversee the training function for the city of Pittsburgh. He approached me and asked me to interview, which I did, and ended up being the candidate chosen. So I spent the last probably 8 years of my municipal fire service career as the assistant fire chief for the city of Pittsburgh. And then because I was the big mouth complaining about how poor the state fire training system was as the training chief in Pittsburgh, then Fire Commissioner Solabay asked me to interview for the assistant administrator position. And by the time my paperwork worked its way through the state bureaucracy, I literally was last man standing, and became the State Fire Academy administrator.
Oh, wow.
So
awesome.
There's a lot of twists and turns in there we could talk through, later if you want to, but that's kind of the synopsis.
Cool. Good deal. Well, congratulations on the position and everything. And, you and I have talked in the past. I think you're going to do, absolutely, outstanding for the State Fire Academy. And, when you said, hey, this podcast is a go, I got the approval to do it. You have no idea how elated I was, being from Pennsylvania and just to be able to highlight, what we're doing here in Pennsylvania, in the fire service. I think it's extremely important. So, again, thanks for being on the show here.
Yeah.
So you're in the seat. We can see it, those that are watching YouTube, those that are listening, in your car, just imagine Tom's in his office. He's in his seat.
Yeah.
He's got the typical firefighter mustache, which is awesome. We love that here in the show. So what does your role entail? When we hear administrator, what does that involve?
So Pennsylvania has what I call a relatively unique approach to firefighter training. We are, if not the only, one of the few states that actually uses a decentralized distributed training methodology. So the way our state works, you have the State Fire Academy, which does some training at the State Fire Academy in Lewistown. We do some direct delivery through our Academy on the Road program, but our primary function is the accreditation of programs and instructors. And we work through a network of 20 at what we call educational training agencies, or ETAs. They're county fire schools, they're community colleges, the two big metro cities, their training divisions are considered ETAs underneath the umbrella of the State Fire Academy. But they're actually independent organizations who engage in the actual delivery of the training programs. So even though we accredit someone such as yourself as what we call a State Fire Academy local level instructor, we actually don't employ you. We just say that you meet a standard, and then it's up to Lehigh Valley Community College to employ you as a classroom or a drill ground instructor. So, we're kind of unique in our approach, whereas most of the other states, they control the delivery as well as the accreditation of a program centrally out of the State Fire Training Agency. So my role is to kind of be the coordinator of, who's doing what, how are we doing it? Are we doing quality assurance checks to make sure our standards are being met for accreditation so that people can get that piece of paper, that certificate that has the seal on it? Additionally, the State Fire Academy is the certifying agency for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So under both Pro Board and IFSAC, we are the licensed agency. But again, Pennsylvania, being Pennsylvania, has to be unique. We are the only state that has a second licensed agency within the state, which would be Bucks County Community College. And they have a Pro Board license to deliver certification testing. So, it's busy. we're in the process of collecting our training numbers from the ETAs, for the pandemic period. And right now, the initial numbers coming back, we're not seeing a reduction in the number of people or hours invested in training in the state right now. So it's really going to be interesting to see what that report looks like at the end of the day, kind of thing. My other role, the other hat, is I support the Office of the State Fire Commissioner in fulfilling their mission, in terms of policy and procedure for the Firemen's Relief Association. Now just got added to us when they passed Act 91 last fall. And the loan program, which we just had the referendum vote to add the career departments into the loan program, the grant program that was done every year. So I get drawn off into those areas as well sometimes.
Sure. So, it's interesting, some of the things you just covered there, I'm going down through my list of questions here. It's well, you talk about, how Pennsylvania is so unique. And, one of the things I was going to say is that, you look at other states, they have either, a state fire commissioner, a state academy, or a state fire marshal, that's in charge of a lot of things. Here in Pennsylvania, we have the state fire commissioner. But again, that whole what makes Pennsylvania different from others, and I think you captured that, in terms of training, because I've been around, especially with DoD, we follow, being retired Air Force, we follow the DoD guidance, NFPA standards, everything like that. That was sort of unique, in our, when you talk about an agency in terms of certification, credentialing, and everything, it all falls under, like Community College of the Air Force, the DoD Fire Academy, not the individual departments or states like that. And fortunately, a lot of states do accept DoD certificates because they're IFSAC or Pro Board. There for the longest time, Pro Board wasn't, they weren't recognizing Pro Boards, and now they are.
Yep.
And a lot of folks are getting that certification. Talking about, you mentioned the referendum that we just had here, the other day. Can you sort of elaborate on what that whole loan program is, and now with what appears, the passing of that referendum, how that's going to change in terms of the whole program? Because there's a lot of confusion I'm hearing is that, well, now that, career departments are involved, that's going to throw a big monkey wrench into the whole loan program, and volunteer organizations are going to be affected. So if you could explain that whole thing.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm not necessarily the best person to talk about the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of the program, but the what used to be called the Volunteer Loan Assistance Program, or VLAP, and it's now the Fire Department Loan Assistance Program, I think is the official title, is probably, and I'm speculating to a great extent,
Sure,
but it's probably one of the few self-sustaining state assistance programs in existence. So, and again, I don't remember off the top of my head when the program was created, but it was endowed with a certain amount of money. And then because the loans are made and paid back with interest, the program is actually self-sustaining. So one of the concerns was, by adding, and it's really like 20 or 30 career departments, it's really not a large number of departments, into the eligibility to apply for loans. Okay, they still have to qualify. They still have to meet the financial qualifications to be eligible to get a loan. But they get the loan, and then they have to make their payments plus interest back into the fund. So it shouldn't impact the stability or the sustainability of the fund, because it kind of generates its own revenue based on the interest payments that are received. So that was one of the big debates that was out there, that by opening this up and letting more people in, look, there's a limit on the number of loans any one department can have at one time. There's a cap I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's like $400,000 that can be out there in any one loan program. So it's not like the city of Pittsburgh's going to get a loan for $10 million to buy 10 ladder trucks.
Yeah.
That's not
Yep.
how that loan program works. So, I personally, I probably shouldn't say this, but, I think it's a good thing for the Pennsylvania Fire Service.
Well, that's a lot of the confusion in the talk that I was hearing is that, now that we got Pittsburgh, Philly, larger departments that are involved, and it's like, if they need, a new station, a new vehicle or something like that. And, I think you can have it like each department can have, 3 loans at a time. And a lot of folks were saying, hey, now that you got these large departments, they're going to suck out some of these loans and the volunteer departments aren't going to be able to go ahead and maintain. But, what you're saying makes perfect sense is that there is an eligibility requirement. They're still going to be capped to the number of loans. And the fact that they're paying it back with interest, that's the big thing. I think people are missing is that it is self-sustaining. I think, some folks were thinking, oh, it's just a pot of money. And once that money is gone, it's not like, the state's just handing out money and it's not recouping it.
Right.
So it's, yeah, no, what you said makes total sense. I think that'll clear up some of the air, here to the Pennsylvania listeners, those around the world, it's going to be, you're going to be like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, it's funny though, you talk about Pennsylvania kind of being unique and, one of the things, and again, we could have a whole separate podcast on, how the training requirements in the Commonwealth and how a Commonwealth actually works, and
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people forget is, even though myself and Commissioner Trago have these titles, we really don't have authority over what the local fire departments do or do not do. So that's where when you see these assistance programs created, that's why there's always strings attached to these assistance programs, is because that's how
Yep.
we can steer people in a certain direction.
Got it. So it's interesting you bring up training. I'm going to skip a few questions here and go into that. And like I said, you and I have talked before. I'm big on training certification. Folks out there, they know I strongly believe, advocate, for proper training, being credentialed, certified, because really it adds, to the professionalism of the individual and the organization they're affiliated with, and the Commonwealth or, whatever the state that you're in overall. So being properly trained, credentialed, some folks may not know out there that it also affects ISO ratings, that it has a positive effect, throughout. Here in Pennsylvania, we have Senate Resolution 6, and I noticed in their Recommendation 18 talks about establishing definitions, classifications, training levels for fire service providers. Is Pennsylvania leaning towards, I know you said, how a Commonwealth works. Is Pennsylvania leaning towards mandating or requiring certain levels of training certification within the firehouse, whether it's volunteer or career?
I'm going to hedge a little bit, Kevin.
Okay.
I'm going to answer you in a couple different ways. So
Okay.
there's several things that have to happen with the implementation of Act 91, what they're calling the Fire Commissioner Act unofficially. There's several steps that are going to have to take place before we're ready to tackle that issue of training standards head on. Okay.
Okay.
So, there's still several steps. The members of the Fire Commission have to be nominated, chosen, and seated before that discussion can actually even start officially.
Okay.
So, and then I'm going to give you 3 answers. So that's that's answer number 1. Answer number 2 is what part of the state, because we have such a diverse Commonwealth / state, what part of the state are we writing this training standard to? Right. So I think a lot of people are overlooking the advantage the current system gives them, that the local fire chief, the local authority having jurisdiction, whether it's a borough, a township, a city, to determine what level of fire protection they want / need / can afford to pay for. If we write a single training standard for all 67 counties, all 2,500 plus fire departments, some people are going to be on the outside looking in and never be able to meet that standard. So, again, my advice as the training expert in the state to the fire commissioner is, let's very slowly start to peel back the layers of this issue so that we don't end up with a system that's not enforceable in a large part of the state, right?
Right.
So, the fire chief in Pittsburgh or, Commissioner Teal in Philadelphia probably have a really good idea what they want this standard to look like, but can, again, I'm going to use a term that I don't mean it to be insulting, but Podunkville Volunteer Fire Department ever meet the same training standard that Philly or Pittsburgh could have? And the answer is going to be no.
Right.
So again, it's a, I hate the word controversial, because I think everybody is in favor. Everybody in the system wants a training standard. But what does that standard look like? What is practical? So do we have to end up with a system with multiple levels in it? There are other states out there that approach it from that aspect, that even to the point that if you're a quote unquote rural fire department, by state standard, you don't get turnout gear and breathing apparatus because you're never going to be qualified to do interior firefighting. I don't think that's good for Pennsylvania, but that is one answer to your question. And the third answer would be me personally, what my personal opinion is. Okay. And we'll just leave that one go.
I think we're on the same page with that. Well, I asked too, and I started out in 1988 here in Central PA, little volunteer department right down the road here. And then I went in the Air Force, did 20 years, and they pride themselves. The DoD does a really great job with training certification. Unfortunately, it's a one size fits all. It doesn't matter the size of your department, where you're at. This is the minimum, training standards they have out there. Some departments use some of the stuff, some of them don't. And I like what you're saying is that, we really need to peel back the layers of the onion and take a hard look at, especially here in PA, because the bulk of Pennsylvania is rural. There's small departments. They're not these big Philly, or Pittsburgh departments. And that, like you had mentioned before, the township, the fire departments, the community really has to sit down and do a needs assessment and say, hey, this is what we need in our department. If I'm following you, because I think if whatever state you're in, if you create a standard, a blanket policy, there, like you said, there's going to be departments out there that can't fulfill it. They're not going to be able to respond because they don't meet the standards. That has a lot of negative effects. So, no, I like what you're saying. It's great that, when you talk about this commission, I mean, it sounds like it hasn't been formed yet, or it's in the works.
It's in the works.
Okay.
So again, the makeup, and I don't have the act in front of me to recall the exact makeup. And again, maybe we need to get you a date with the fire commissioner to talk about what's going on in the fire commission as well.
Definitely.
So all of the stakeholder groups in Pennsylvania. So the Career Firefighters Association, the Career Fire Chiefs Association, the Volunteer Firefighters Association, all these subgroups have seats on this commission. So again, the fire commissioner has to, and again, we have to create the mechanics. How do we reimburse them for their expenses and their time?
Yeah.
And, so all the mechanics need to be developed kind of behind the scenes that no one sees before we can actually seat a commission and start working, because they're supposed, there's a lot of things in Act 91 that this commission is supposed to tackle that need tackled, and the training standard issue is only one of those. So, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The commission is going to have to roll its collective sleeves up and really
Yeah.
put some effort into looking at both what's required by Act 91 and the recommendations out of Senate Resolution 6. And,
Got it.
what is, and again, what is really the best course to set, from the top down for the Pennsylvania delivery system, the training
Yeah.
delivery, the emergency services response delivery, community risk reduction. There's so many paths that need to be looked at and examined for validity. It's going to take a long time to really start to see some results.
Yeah. Yep. And that's important to talk about, is, because, the general citizen out there, they don't see or hear the behind the scenes things. And that's another reason why I was glad, that you're on the show, that, the State Fire Academy is on the show, and to give a little bit of insight, shed some light on what's going on behind the scenes. So, folks can understand there is a process. Things don't happen overnight. There's like you
Especially
said,
with a state bureaucracy.
Oh gosh. So earlier on, you mentioned with COVID, touch base on it a little bit. We know 2021 was, it was tough. It was hell on citizens, especially emergency responders out there. You and I briefly talked about this, offline in our communications before. How has COVID itself and the restrictions that the state, some of the mandates and everything that they put out there, how has that affected the State Fire Academy as a whole, either at the academy, local level, really, in general? How's that affected the process of getting training out there?
Yeah, so initially in March of 2020, we went through the same thing everybody else did. We went with that hard stop. I think the phrase at the time was 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Yeah.
And here we are, 19 months later now, and we still
Yep.
in the middle of a lot of these restrictions. And again, so then once we realized it wasn't just a 2 week hard stop, it was going to extend. We started to look at, well, what can we legitimately do while still protecting the health and wellness of everybody involved in the training system. So, not just the firefighters, not just the instructor in front of the firefighters, but the support staff and, the general public. And, again, I'm a firm believer in looking at the ripple effect of any decision that you make. So just like the public school system and the college and university system, we made a very quick decision in March to move into what I picked up the term from the colleges, emergency remote teaching. All right. So we'll put a camera in front of the instructor, and the students can sit on their couch at home and listen to the instructor drone on. Well, again, an emergency remote teaching, the name says exactly what it is, because we knew we weren't going to be providing the same level of education and training in that mode that we would in our normal face-to-face delivery. So again, that was kind of the first step we did. And then once we had the guidelines from CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health, we worked very closely with the 20 educational training agencies to write site-specific operational plans that allowed the resumption of face-to-face training while still protecting the health and wellness of everybody involved. And again, I break them down into the three core practices, right? Screening to make sure people that are sick aren't coming to your programs in the first place, and then the masking and the physical separation, right?
Yep.
So, and then we've gone through 3 or 4 iterations of those pandemic operational plans, and we're starting to see things loosen up a little bit, we'll call it. But we still are not back to what was our most common method of teaching in most cases, where we were sending instructors to the fire stations. And the reason that is kind of the last thing we're looking at is that direct delivery at the fire station, is because we don't control that environment. So here at the Fire Academy in Lewistown, I can control the environment. at the Montgomery County Fire Academy or the Allegheny County Fire Academy at Harrisburg Area Community College, you can control that environment. If I'm sending an instructor to, a fire department, you're at the whim of what that fire department sets as its standard. So even though we say we're not going to come to your fire department and teach unless you do these following things, there's still and I'll call it an inability to control those things and make sure they're actually happening. So again, even though we have not prohibited the ETAs from teaching in that local level, that direct delivery environment, most of them have been very reluctant to go down that path to this point. Now, as we approach the Memorial Day weekend and the governor has, promised to start lifting the restrictions other than masking, and, until we see what that looks like, I don't know what the next iteration is. Here at Lewistown, our resident program is up and running. So the classes we actually host at the facility in Lewistown are running as scheduled. Our direct delivery in the field programs will be, right now, we've said we'll start that back up as of July 1. So that gives us the month of June to analyze, assess, and create an operational plan based on what the governor changes the restrictions to. So that's our approach. And we told the 20 educational training agencies, you really need to evaluate what's going on. All right. But as usual with bureaucracy, last week, I got 3 different emails on 3 different days. The CDC, vaccinated people don't need to wear masks. PA Department of Health, vaccinated people don't need to be. Then the Office of Administration, who I really work for, says, we don't care what CDC and PA Department of Health said. We're not changing anything right now. So they didn't really say it literally that way, but
yeah.
By the way, are you hiring when someone in the OA sees this and fires me?
Yeah, you can be a co-host on here, sure. So one thing all across America, and I'm sure even, overseas, around the world, when it comes to fire service organizations, whether it be firefighters, EMS, especially volunteers, recruitment is of, that's the biggest concern. Here in PA, we had massive numbers years and years ago. We're down to, was it 30-some thousand, volunteers?
The number that's tossed around is 35,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the academy doing? What's the state legislation, the academy, yourself, the commissioner, everybody involved in that, what's being done to try to entice recruitment, retention, incentivize, because that's a big thing, what we're hearing is that, especially, when I was in the DOD, we worked with our volunteer, colleagues, outside the fence line. And it was frustrating because here we are, career firefighters, granted we were, military, federal, and then standing right across from us was volunteers. To the layperson, they see somebody in turnout gear, you can't differentiate who's paid, who's career. And the volunteers are like, I'm doing the same job you're doing, but I don't get paid for it. I don't get the benefits. And they sort of get frustrated. So how, going back, like I said, what's the state doing? And, now, and maybe what's on the horizon to get those numbers back up to, healthy numbers.
Yeah. So again, that's really a better question for the fire commissioner than me, but I'll fill you in with
what are you doing here then?
I'm sorry, you wanted to talk training. I'm your guy, but I'll do my best. Right.
Nah, it's all good.
So the fire commission does have a funding source, a budget line item in their budget for recruitment and retention. There were 3 positions added to the complement at the commission to handle recruitment and retention, and then we hit that hard stop of COVID. So again, it's now bubbled back up to the top of the priority list to get those 3 positions filled. And the focus of that office within the fire commission is going to function as kind of a resource or a consulting basis with the fire departments in Pennsylvania. One of the initial visions was, can we become a clearinghouse for best practices for recruitment and retention for the Commonwealth, rather than just, here's a program, or, we'll manage a length of service award program, because again, with the diverse community we're talking about of fire departments in Pennsylvania, there is no one perfect answer. All right. But I'll give you an interesting perspective, because when I look at the total training numbers in Pennsylvania of the student, and again, right now, the only number I have is how many students register for day one of the entry-level firefighter training classes statewide. And we're bringing close to 10,000 new firefighters into the training system in Pennsylvania every year. So and again, it's not enough to make a definitive statement, but that number leads me to believe maybe we don't have a recruitment problem. Regionally, we probably do, but statewide, it's maybe not as big an issue as we think it is. And we have a retention problem, because if we're bringing 10,000 in, but the number never changes from 35, or it continues to go down, where are they all going? And a parallel is, with our parallel agency, the EMS Bureau for the Department of Health. I don't remember the number that Director Ferguson quotes all the time, but out of all the people that test for EMT in the Commonwealth or paramedic, like less than 30% of them actually ride on an ambulance. So where are the rest of them going?
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of level of detail in our statistics, because again, the distributed system doesn't allow us to do that yet. But 10,000 new firefighters a year, and that's a rounded up number, rough number. That's not an exact statistic. But
sure.
Maybe we don't have a recruitment problem. Okay, so now let's focus on the retention aspect. We're getting them in the door, but then for whatever reason, they become disassociated, dissatisfied, and they move on to other things, and that was one of the reasons we wanted to get the training system stood back up as quickly as we could last year. We wanted to keep the firefighters we have engaged, so that they're not sitting on their couch developing, and this is not as detrimental as it sounds, they're not developing other hobbies, other interests, and then they never come back to the fire department. Okay, so, so that retention piece, I think, is going to be really the key that we need to address.
Yeah. And especially in the rural areas, when it comes to, the departments around here, locally we're based out of at, there is a retention problem. We obviously we love to have our numbers higher than what they are. Rural areas, you don't get the call volume like you do in Pittsburgh, Philly. You get that sense of boredom, if you will, sometimes. And I've heard that, here in Pennsylvania, and, social media, different firefighter pages out there, volunteer firefighter pages. There's a couple comments that are going out. People had posted, I wish I get a structure fire. I wish I get this. And it's like, no, you really don't want to have a structure fire or anything like that, because end of the day, somebody's property's, being destroyed. I've always said we do our best job when we don't do our job. But it's that training, that proficiency. We still have to hone our skills and everything. And financially, financially, some of these smaller departments, they don't have the revenue to create training props or anything like that. Yep. We can hump hose all day long. At some point, there's a burnout period. And for me, I've seen, especially with the younger guys and girls out there in the fire service, they're like, we're just not getting the calls. What am I doing here? They get bored real quick. And like you said, get other hobbies, they get sidetracked. First couple months or a year, they're always down at the fire department showing interest. And then they start weaning off, and it's like, hey, where's Joe? Where's Jane at? They haven't come around. So what words of advice do you have for that? What can we, What's Tom Cook's opinion on that in terms of how do we encourage, how do we entice folks to like you said, before, stay active, stay engaged in the service? Because it's, when you look at the fire service in the fire department, it goes beyond the apparatus and everything. There's the community involvement. So what things could we do to get out there in the community and show, hey, we exist?
Well, I think you just kind of hit the nail on the head, not just with community involvement, but you know, most volunteer fire departments probably, and again, this is an opinion. I'll probably get
Sure.
crucified in social media for saying this, but
Nah,
need
I
to
got your
view
back.
themselves as a social club that goes to fires once in a while. So how
Yeah.
do we engage the membership, make being a member of the organization social and fun? So what other activities can we get involved in? The combination department in Mount Lebanon that I was a lieutenant with, there every weekend, every Friday night during First Fridays during the summer, the volunteer side of the organization was out involved in those community events. If you're one of those traditional, I'm a firefighter and don't bug me and get me out of the recliner until the alarm goes off, that is not necessarily a fun environment. But I think
Right.
there's ways that the leadership of the organizations can make those kind of events fun. We need to get back to fun.
Yeah.
That doesn't lessen the
Yep.
need for professionalism and qualifications and all that. But so how do I make all that fun? Is I think one of the things that really needs to be looked at. Because when I look back over my career through, and again, I'm one of those that's blessed to be in all three types, the 100% volunteer organization, the combination department, and then a very large metro career department. When the guys and gals are having fun and they're engaged, I always, I've been in the white helmet for so long now, that's kind of my permanent perspective. There's less problems. There's less
Yeah.
things being broke. There's less discipline issues there, because they're engaged in something and they're having fun,
Yeah.
And unfortunately for us as firefighters, the most fun we like to have is someone else's worst day of their life. And
Yeah. Yep.
I don't disagree with you, Kevin. We need to, whole community risk reduction piece needs a lot more attention. So how do I take those volunteers or the career guys and engage them in the community risk reduction stuff, but in a way that it's not a big pain in the butt, it's fun. We're
Yeah.
out interacting with the community. We're out, doing fun things with kids groups and school groups. I think there's a lot to be said for looking at some of those types of things. Yeah, from the traditional fire department perspective, they're a big drain on time and effort and energy, but I think it can be spun into that motivating factor to keep people involved.
Yeah, that was the big challenge, if you will, especially, my military firefighters that are listening and watching, it's the Air Force. I mean, you rarely, because we prided ourselves so much on prevention that, rarely did we have a structure fire, an aircraft crash, those big incidents,
Yeah.
that we train for. And, that's our purpose, hey, we're here to, for the big incidents. We don't, obviously prevention within our local communities, could be more, but morale was the big thing. And you're spot on, is that, finding those other fun things, because I can attest, in the military, when morale was low, you could walk into the front door of the firehouse and you could just sense it. You were like, what's going on? And, people were dragging feet, and it's like, I don't want to be here. And, they were making excuses. But when the fun things occurred, and I'm talking about, fires, emergencies, boom, they were excited. They were ready to go. And then they come back and it's like, you get that wah, wah. So I guess, everybody watching and listening is find that, like Tom just said, find that fun thing that once you reach that, keep it going, maintain it. Because otherwise, and it comes down to leadership too. And it's not just, I don't think it's just the white helmets either, Tom. I think it's everybody in a firehouse is a leader. Because whether it's a brand new recruit or the old salty guy, the chief officers, we're all representatives of the organization.
Yep.
And when we go out and we see the public, again, they see you or I, if we're not, wearing something that says, hey, we're a chief or whatever, they're just like, hey, you're a member of the organization, so we have to represent. And if our attitudes are poor, how do you think that makes the public feel? Yep.
Well, the volunteer department I was involved in the 80s had a very strong live-in program. And in Monroeville, there are 5 independent fire departments in the municipality.
Okay.
And at the time, 2 of us had very active, strong live-in programs because of being a suburb of Pittsburgh with all the colleges and universities and UPMC's paramedic program, the Center for Emergency Medicine's paramedic program. So we had a really active group of live-ins. And, they came to me one Sunday morning, hey, we want to go have breakfast as a group at, Jaden's restaurant. Can we take the engine in the truck? Sure. Take the engine in the truck, go have breakfast. Then we started with, the other fire stations. We once a month would rotate for dinner through the 5 fire stations. And, so those kind of the social aspect of being a volunteer, start. And again, you're 100% right. When they were engaged in those social activities, the station was clean, the apparatus was clean and ready for service, and when you got away from some of the social stuff, you have to remind them to empty the garbage can, kind of thing. And Greensburg Fire Department right now has a very successful, very active junior firefighting program. Because they've made it fun. They do, they do like sleepovers with the juniors at the fire stations. They take them on field trips. They push them to train and do things in training that they can do as junior firefighters. So there are answers out there. And to me, that's probably what the role of that recruitment and retention office should be from the fire commission, is how do we collect those ideas? And then, Kevin, you as the fire chief could come to the commission and say, look, I'm struggling to get people in the door. What are my options? And we can say, here you go. Here's the catalog of options. Because for a rural fire department, a live-in program probably isn't going to do anything for them.
Right.
Because what's the attraction? Well, and again, limited perspective. I haven't visited every fire department or every community in the Commonwealth yet. But where you see successful live-in programs, there's usually something else that attracts them to the fire department, whether it's college, university, call volume, lots of fires. There's something that brings them in the door. It's not the live-in program itself. There's some other bright, shiny object that gets their attention, and then the live-in program thrives because of that.
Yep.
Yeah. Now watch, we'll get all kinds of comments that, it's wrong. It works here because this and that, and the high school CTC programs are not the be all end all either. In some areas it's a great recruiting tool, but in other areas it's not so much, and that's why I said, I don't know that there's a silver bullet that's going to solve that problem for us. I think we need a menu of choices, and then by experimentation, we figure out which one works for which situation. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what I liked, when I was active duty, we'd always have a network. We'd always say, these are the best practices. We'd go out and we'd do inspections, and then we'd create a best practices. So the other departments be like, yeah, that may not be, a fit for our department, but we could tweak it a little bit to make it work, because it was always throwing out ideas. And I think that's something that's really important in a fire service, is that, we network, whether you're volunteer, career, combination, anything like that. Network with everybody, because there's always something out there that you can incorporate and better, You always want to strive to better your organization, better yourselves. It's that development. So Tom, with fire instructors, let's get back on training here for a little bit. So for state fire instructors, how does, I'm going through the process, as you know, to be a state fire instructor. Can you just let our listeners know, how that process works in Pennsylvania? And because they've heard you talk about local level instructors.
Yeah.
And I think some people may be like, what's a local level instructor? So can you just, describe, that whole program, the way the instructors work?
So this, yeah. How do I do this in a way that actually makes sense? Because I'm not so certain our system is really engineered the best it could be. So by the time I get done explaining it and people actually grasp the concept, we'll probably end up changing it. That's usually how this works, right?
Okay.
But so we have what we call local level or State Fire Academy local level instructors, and that's kind of our core cadre for instructional delivery. They're accredited by the State Fire Academy, and then they actually are employed by those educational training agencies to deliver training and education. So we set the qualification standard. So you have to have 5 years experience. You have to have certain classes and, certain certifications to be eligible, right? So you make application, and then we review the application, we interview candidates, we do background checks, and and then you get the blessing to move forward. And then they're broken into, there's actually 3 categories, but really there's 2 primary categories, what we call non-suppression and suppression instructors. So the non-suppression instructors are accredited to teach, and it's program by program, so it's not groups of programs, but they're accredited to teach things like incident management, vehicle rescue, that don't involve live fire or fire ground operations. And they have a slightly reduced qualification list compared to our suppression instructors. Now, so then suppression instructors get to teach the structure burns, the engine company, the truck company classes, those kind of things. Okay.
Yeah.
We currently have statewide, we have approximately 1,200 people on the books as local level instructors. That number has dropped under my tenure because I've started to enforce the rules, so to speak, in terms of activity level, where we've had complaints, we've dismissed instructors, those kind of steps. We at one point, just like the PA Fire Service, we were up close to 2,000 instructors statewide.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Not so sure we were doing a really good job managing that number of instructors. So the reason I say it's probably going to change is because our non-suppression suppression levels don't line up well with the NFPA instructor standard, which now is set up as assistant instructor, instructor in charge, and then the live fire credential is a whole separate credential beyond your instructor credential. So we have a project going on right now. We've been out interviewing instructors and ETA staff, doing a true job task analysis of what a state fire instructor needs to be, with the goal is by the end of the spring here to actually write a functional job description for a state fire instructor. And then the next phase of that project will be to develop a development and qualification system to reach the performance standards set with that job description. All right.
Okay.
So that's why I said, as soon as I get done explaining it, we're going to probably change it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the coursework is going to remain the same, but it might be sequenced different than it is right now. Because one of the big gaps that I see as a non-suppression instructor in Pennsylvania, you can teach rescue courses. So you could be out teaching people how to rappel, 500 feet off of a bridge. but you never go through a risk management training class because we reserve that for the suppression instructors.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So again, we've identified some of the gaps, and we're hoping through the research to pinpoint other gaps in our process that we can kind of restructure and change so that we're closing those gaps and putting a better product on the street. That's the ultimate goal, is let's put a better product on the street. I've said it in instructor meetings for the past 3 years. We're doing a really good job right now as a state developing presenters, but we're not doing such a good job developing true instructors.
Yep.
And that's not meant to be insulting, but we need to change the goal of our system, that we're putting instructors in front of these students and not just presenters.
Exactly. Yep. No, I couldn't agree more on that. So, well, Tom, that's all the hot seat questions that I have. So, as I typically like to do, the last opportunity goes to my guests. So, is there anything that you want to talk about, get off your chest, that affects firefighters, not just here in PA, but really around the world?
Well, I've been blessed with the career that I've had so far. I really have. I've got to see the business from the three big perspectives. As a volunteer, as a combination officer, and as a chief in a metropolitan city. And now I'm running a state training agency. You talk about a dream career for a training guy, right?
Yep.
I've really had the opportunity to do a lot of really interesting, neat things. And, the biggest thing that scares me, and it's more a generational thing, it's not just to the fire service, is the I hate the word entitlement mentality, but that's what I'll use. The entitlement mentality that we're starting to see come into the fire service, right? Where everybody gets a trophy. I'm entitled to this. And when we restructured our instructor policy in 2018, we really changed a lot of the language in there so that this is a privilege to be a state fire instructor. No one is guaranteed to get in, and no one's guaranteed to stay in. That you're gonna get in on your own merits, and you're gonna stay in on your own merits. And we've really kind of refocused the operation here at the state level. It's going to take a little while. But there's still an awful lot of pencil whipping of forms that goes on in the training system. And
sure.
we need to kind of weed that out or reform the individuals that are engaged in that. You have a course that's supposed to be 16 hours of student contact, and we have reports from students that instructors are completing that course in 4 hours and still giving people the same certificate. Those are the kind of issues that we got to figure out how to close. The other big topic for me right now, as things start to loosen up, every fire department in the Commonwealth seems to think they can light whatever they want on fire and squirt water on it. Well, guess what? There's laws that prohibit you from doing it that way. And, to do it appropriately, yes, there's a couple extra hoops to jump through, but it's not that much of an inconvenience to do it the right way. And, so where we're made aware of those instances occur, and we're taking some pretty aggressive enforcement action, it's not, and I'm the last guy that wants to see training stop. But we got to do it right. And again, a lot of my perspective, Kevin, it comes out of the fact that I was here in 2005 when Captain Gallardi was fatally injured in training at the State Fire Academy in Lewistown. I was in the building with him when he was injured, and I wasn't at his side. I was on a different level of the building, but I was part of the process and the crew of dragging him out of the building. And so again, a lot of my perspective about safety and training it revolves around that event. And the shame of it is
Yeah.
the only person who knows exactly what happened that day is never going to be able to tell us.
Right. Yep.
So one of the things that we're working on here, I'm waiting for some legal clarification about what we can and can't do or say, because obviously there was a lot of legal investigation
Right.
into that incident. There was a program created, lessons learned kind of approach shortly
Yep.
after the incident. I want to resurrect that program so that Captain Gawardi can continue to teach.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even in the military, I mean, the military listeners know when, events, certain mishaps or tragedies occur. I mean, we use those as a learning tool,
Yep.
so that we prevent future occurrences, from happening. And, it's, I interviewed, Billy Goldfeder, several episodes ago, and he caught me off guard by saying, one thing is that, some firefighters have to die. I'm still on the fence with that comment, but I look at, I look at it is that, when firefighters do die, the tragic, obviously our goal is never have a line of duty death. We need to use that, like you absolutely just said, use it as a learning tool. Don't, keep their name, keep that individual alive in the training sense. So, it's, we always say, we never forget, you'll never be forgotten. I think that's what we need to do, is that keep their legacy alive in terms of,
Yeah.
yes, this tragedy happened. However, let's use that, for, future, to prevent future occurrences. And it goes back to that, don't present it, instruct it. And I love, the way you lay that out is that, let's not have presenters. Everybody can do a death by PowerPoint.
Yep.
It's, we need the true instructors out there, whether they're street smart or, they've got some experience under their belt that says, hey, this is, what you need to be, looking for. And because really at the end of the day, I mean, you and we're not going to be around forever.
I'm at
so
the
we
tail
need
end
to,
of it.
no, not even, brother. You're still young. But seriously though, I mean, we need to get that mentality. We need to get the next generation and the generation after that spun up to take over the reins in the fire emergency services. Cause I mean, if we don't do it now, who's going to do, do I dare say it? It may not happen, later on down the road. And then where do we find ourselves? So.
Yeah, and I think I've been around long enough, Kevin. I've seen the safety pendulum swing several times from extreme to extreme.
Yeah.
And, we need to find that happy medium, in that kind of mid-spectrum point where we can still operate aggressively and effectively while minimizing risk to personnel. But,
Yep.
we went through a period, several times where we emphasized safety to the point that we weren't operationally effective. Right now, my personal belief is the pendulum swung a little bit too far the other way, where we're emphasizing aggressiveness and operational effectiveness. And we've kind of lost some of that safety perspective. And again, not that I want it to go back over to the other side again, but we got to be careful, because some of these young, impressionable firefighters right now, if the only education they get is from social media, they're getting the impression that it is okay to purposely sacrifice your life without any potential gain from that sacrifice.
Yep.
I'm all about the whole philosophy of we're here for them, and, aggressive command supports aggressive firefighting. I could cite a lot of examples, but I think we need to be careful how that message is being received by the youngest generation of firefighters today. Because they're not getting, to Billy G's point, they're not getting the other side of the argument. And again, unfortunately, we don't do really great things in the training system, right? risk a lot to save a lot, risk a little to save a little. Well, what the hell does that mean to an 18, 19-year-old firefighter that just wants to get in the burning building and wrestle hand to hand with the dragon?
Yep.
Okay. That's what we're forgetting. And, how do we close again? How does the training system start to close those gaps without forcing that safety pendulum to slide too far the other way again?
Right.
And again, I know that's not necessarily a popular position for me to have, but those that work with me in the field know I do some pretty crazy, stupid things on the fire ground in the name of operational effectiveness.
I think we've all been there. So yeah.
And again, you're right though. What lessons do we learn when we run out of the luck and the fates catch up with us? I have to admit, Kevin, every time I ever got sent to the hospital from a fire ground in the back of an ambulance, I have to probably admit I was doing something at the time I got hurt I knew I shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
But you're here with us. We can learn from. Well, no, seriously. I mean, you're here. We can learn from those.
Yeah.
Those incidents. I've talked in the past. The firefighter near miss program that's out there. It's run by the IAFC. It's still stringing along. It's there for a while. We thought it was going to dissolve due to funding, but it's still out there. It's a means for people can get on there, look at different things that happened. So that's another tool for the toolbox. And I think even the young guys, the young firefighters, emergency responders need to really look at those and say, hey, this could happen, in our area, whether it's rural or urban or anything like that. So.
Yeah, for me, the two hot topics, and again, we kind of got distracted from them with the whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
And we're gonna refocus. In fact, I just made a change in operations today. I have an instructor candidate group here doing their live fire evaluations this weekend, and I've reopened the locker room in the facility so that they can shower at the end of each day.
Nice.
So again, we're going to get back to the principles of the Lavender Report in terms of cancer prevention. We're looking at ways we can push the behavioral health issues a little harder in our training programs than we do currently. I think there are some very important problems that need dealt with, and there are some practical solutions. There's some impractical solutions, but again, to your point about leadership, we as the State Fire Academy should be kind of setting the standard whenever, and again, that's for some people, what we're going to be able to do, they're not going to be able to do because of resource limitations, whether it's money, people, equipment, whatever. But we should be striving to set the example, and we'll see what comes of it, because as right now, the leading cause of death for emergency response personnel is suicide.
Yep.
The leading cause of death for firefighters after suicide is cancer. Now line of duty death, we still have the whole cardiac issue to deal with, and we drive like idiots. We could run down the annual report. And again, I've been in, 40 years. In the 40 years I've been in the business, those numbers don't change.
Right.
What are we doing wrong then? Now I will tell you, having been around when the firefighter life safety initiatives were first pushed out, I would argue, the statistics aren't showing it yet, but we have a safer fire service today because of that initiative than we did in the 70s and 80s when I started. So it has had a positive impact. The statistics just haven't caught up with it yet,
We're getting there. So
there's a lot of things that we need to address, and we're going to start chipping away at it one step at a time. That's all we can do.
Yep. Now we appreciate it. I appreciate it. So anything else that you got?
Oh, I could go on all day, Kevin, but I think for your podcast, that's probably enough, right?
This will be version 1 podcast, so hopefully we can get you back on the show, and do some follow-ups on
Sure.
that. So awesome. Well, folks, that's going to do it for this episode. The weekend wrap up here on AFSO 21 Radio. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Tom, the Pennsylvania State Fire Academy administrator, his words of wisdom, his knowledge, his background. Tom, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to kind of spout off about what I feel is important.
No, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. So folks, as always, stay safe. Keep supporting your local fire emergency services. And as we wrap up, stay tuned to hear a few words from our parent company, AFSO 21. So until next time, folks, this is Kevin Ferrara. I'm out of here.
Veteran-owned and operated AFSO 21 Agile Fire Service Organization for the 21st century applies their extensive background in fire protection and emergency services to deliver support with identifying, developing, implementing, and maintaining strategies and techniques essential to operate and sustain an emergency response organization. AFSO 21 services include staffing analysis, risk assessment, standards of cover, training, management, and financial reviews. AFSO 21 is prepared to support your organization with increasing your capabilities values. For more information, please go to afso21.com. That's AFSO21.com.